This is one of my favorite photographs ever taken. It was captured in 1977 and features 7 CEOs of large cigarette companies testifying to the American Congress that nicotine wasn't addictive, something that they had known to be not true for a few years at that point. And I like this photo because it acts as somewhat of a Rorschach test with 2 distinct interpretations. Interpretation 1 is to look back and laugh. These idiotic savages were from a different time, unlike we, the rational modern man who would never fall for something so obvious. But if that's what you think, then I should probably admit that I've lied to you. This photo was not taken in the 70s, and it wasn't even black and white. It was taken in the mid-90s, far too close to call a different age. And that's why I prefer interpretation 2, which states that while yes, these people were products of their time, blinded by their environments, that they are similar to us, and that we are under the exact same spell, which only begs the question, what are we blind to? The other day, this video came up on my Instagram feed. It featured a woman using the pretty extreme cutting edge of digital beautification, and I was ashamed and terrified to admit that at first, I didn't notice it. Because for years now, I've heard people talk about AI as something just over the horizon that in a few years we're going to need to account for. But this technology is not coming. It is already here, and it is frighteningly prevalent. CapCut, the editing software owned by TikTok that I use, has so many options for thinning your body, changing the shape of your face, whitening your teeth, that it resembles an industry-standard piece of software, not something that my 14-year-old cousin would have installed on his phone. And so in this video, I want to talk about that. I'm going to give a timeline of how these technologies became so prevalent and accepted. I'm going to cover the sheer damage that the research is showing it's doing to young children, and then I'm going to talk about solutions. I'm old enough to remember that in the 2010s, photoshopped models were the moral panic of the day. I remember so many think pieces and PSAs going on about how this will ruin the mental health of young kids. There were entire YouTube exposés getting millions of views. In 2015, this was not normal. It was actively frowned upon and heavily scrutinized. And then, in 2016, the Snapchat dog filter hit store shelves. And I'm not kidding when I say that this was the flashpoint which changed everything. Whether it's those photo booths you'd see in clubs, dancing elf Christmas cards, or the Game Boy camera, the idea of digitally altering photos to make them funny and quirky is nothing new. And so when Snapchat released a filter that gave you the ears and tongue of a dog, nobody thought it was out of the ordinary. But this filter was, of course, doing something else. It was digitally smoothing out your skin, changing the shape of your face, enlarging your eyes. In short, it was the first major example of mainstream digital beautification. And bear in mind that at the time, this was considered somewhat of a hidden or unknown to the public feature. There are articles from the time entitled things like, "The shocking, surprising, secret reason that you love this filter so much." Quirky add-ons to photos and their massive popularity was the Trojan horse that got the first skin smoothing and face sculpting features through to the public. And while the early examples of this weren't terribly well made, they made you look like a cartoon character with skin made of silk. As the technology progressed and companies like Meta invested more and more effort in having the best filters on the market, we, like the frog in the pot of boiling water without ever realizing it, got to a point where all of us were altering our faces all of the time. Because once you make being surrounded by a bunch of Greek soldiers the norm, you don't even need the Trojan horse anymore. You can just admit to what you're doing. And so consent was manufactured. The technology became a daily part of our life without anyone noticing, and the taboo was broken.
If you want the numbers, around 90% of young women have used a face editing filter at least once. If we control for only girls under the age of 13, that number retains to 85%.
That is to say, if you open your Instagram feed right now, and by no means do this, and look through your friends, less than half of them are how they appear in real life. And I think that casualness is the real insidious part. When this technology was in its infancy, when it was Photoshop that required paying a specialist hours to produce a result, the only times that you would see edited bodies were in, like, magazine covers, which I think that everyone knows exists in this weird kind of limbo state outside of normal life. You look at a model and you implicitly know, I'm not supposed to reach that standard. But when it's on social media, when it's your friends or people who are paid to make you think that they're your friend, it suddenly becomes something that can't be compartmentalized and put off to the side. It's just your daily reality. And let me stress again, just how fucking good this technology has gotten. You can't spot it in so many cases. You have probably scrolled multiple bodies today that have featured this. And just like the cigarette companies, which long after the research had been produced, continually denied that tobacco caused cancer, denied that nicotine was addictive, it's time we stop denying the sheer damage we are doing to young people, particularly young girls. Using social media for 3 hours a day was linked to a doubling in your chances of developing eating disorders. The average amount of time children are spending on social media, by the way, is about 5 hours per day. And because of the way that the word average works, 50% of them are above that. In a study that was done on 13 and 14-year-olds regularly using social media, about 45% of boys and 65% of girls admitted to skipping meals or over-exercising, the early warning signs of anorexia. To put that back in human terms, if you have a young person in your life, maybe a cousin or niece, flip a fucking coin. Yeah. It is clear as day that using apps that with surgical precision send you hundreds of images of top 1% attractiveness bodies every single day is going to severely impact the way you view yourself. And body image and eating disorders, might I remind you, are the mental health condition with the highest fatality rate. And here's where I'm going to scare you even further. The majority of research we have on the link between eating disorders and social media was done pre-pandemic. This is how much harm you can do without using these filters. I cannot fathom the current damage we are doing to this upcoming generation, which is growing up around these filters, seeing them every day, not even knowing it. So, now that I have successfully terrified you, let's try and steer this video into a more positive direction by talking about solutions.
Policy Proposal 1. Mandatory disclosure. Mandatory disclosure laws already exist in most countries. If you're watching a movie, the cinema or DVD box has to include things like an age rating and information about whether or not it includes swearing. If you buy food, the manufacturer is required to tell you details about what's in it, like its nutrition and calories. And so via the same precedent, if social media users are uploading content for you to see, they should be required to tell you if they have included digital beautification. The way that this would work in practical terms is that there would be some kind of standardized symbol that represents that some form of Photoshop or AI has been used on an image, and that wherever these images are shown, be it magazine covers or Instagram posts, this logo would be legally required to be shown on the image. And this policy alone would significantly reduce the harm of these images. Because if every time you see an altered body, you are aware that that's what you're looking at, you can say to yourself, yes, they look beautiful, but I know this image isn't real, and so I'm not going to aspire to look like this. I'm not going to let it affect my self-esteem. But awareness alone wouldn't be enough to solve the issue. Therefore, Policy Proposal 2 is right to refuse. To go back to the analogy I gave before of films and food production, the reason that mandatory disclosure is effective is because you as a consumer can refuse to buy things. If you believe that a film's content will be upsetting to you or your children, you can refuse to go to the cinema. If you believe that the contents of a food product are unhealthy, you can refuse to buy it. But if you believe an account on social media is editing their photos, you can't refuse to see them. Because on social media, you don't choose what content you see. The algorithm feeds it to you automatically. Therefore, in order for disclosure laws to be fully effective, we need to be given tools to choose what content appears on our feeds. To explain how this one would work, I'll compare it to the features that already exist on Instagram's platform. Right now, if you open your settings menu, you will have the option to block comments via keywords. Meaning if you block a certain word or phrase, any comment containing that will never show up in your feed. And so all that we'd be requiring Instagram and other apps to do would be to expand these features to include content. If I believe as an individual or parent that content like dieting, looks maxing, or body checking is harmful to myself or my child, I should be able to block it outright from my app, putting these features in my blocked words so that no content of this genre ever appears on my feed. And so these two policies will successfully prevent children and adults who opt out from ever seeing this content. But we also need to make sure that they aren't able to create it either. Therefore, policy 3 would be age gates on the filters themselves. The way that this policy would work is, you know how in the UK you have to do a mandatory age check to prove your age on porn websites now? All we'd have to do is expand this mandatory age checking to all beauty filters. And in this case, there wouldn't even be a privacy concern because when you're using a filter, you're already taking a picture of your face anyway. Everybody agrees that minors are not able to consent to things that may affect them in the long term, like tattoos or sex. And so I see no reason they should be able to consent to using beauty filters on themselves. And this single policy will prevent them from ever doing so. And so that's really all you need. With mandatory disclosure and right to refuse, you prevent people from seeing them, and by age-gating filters, you can prevent minors from using them. But just for the hell of it, I'll throw a fourth bonus policy on the end. Policy Proposal 4 is to ban beauty filters in advertising. It would be legally impossible to ban beauty filters altogether, because at the end of the day, people have a right to free expression, and could fairly challenge that as an adult, it is well within their rights to edit their photos and distribute them if they so choose. But there's one domain in which the right to free expression does not exist, and that's advertising. Because advertising is done for profit, not as an individual choosing to say something, it's not considered protected speech, and so can be banned. It would mean that these glamorous lifestyles depicted in luxury car and perfume commercials, blasted to the top of Times Square, wouldn't be allowed to show you altered bodies way outside of what actual humans look like, further preventing one more source of people seeing these images. And so with my policy proposals laid out, let's move on to the final and most important part of this video, what you as an individual citizen can do to make these policies happen. For those who skipped ahead to the most important bit of this video, welcome back. Policy Proposal 1 of mandatory disclosure actually isn't my own. It's already being proposed in the Houses of Commons. All it needs is the votes to pass through. Therefore, if we as citizens write to them requesting that they vote yes, there's a decent chance they will. So actionable step 1 is to go to the top line of the description. There you'll find a website which will allow you to type in your postcode and find the name of your local representative. Right next to it is a Google Doc I've created with a template for an email you can send to them requesting that they vote yes. Putting that email address and text into an email and pressing send will take you less than 2 minutes and will be an extremely high return on investment way of guaranteeing this policy. The Google Doc also includes a template for people outside of the UK that doesn't represent the bill in our country. You'll have to find your own country's local representative, but you can absolutely send this email as well. Policies 2 and 4 actually have the exact same actionable step, and that's to send a letter to our regulatory bodies. In the UK, regulatory bodies are non-governmental entities that have the power to regulate industries. The two that are relevant here are Ofcom for social media and the ASA for advertising. Unlike politicians that have 100 things to worry about, their single goal is regulating their industries and ask the public how they would like them to go about this. Therefore, reports and letters sent to these regulatory bodies, especially if they're signed by large numbers of people, are very likely to have an effect. On the 30th of May 2026, I will be sending these two letters to Ofcom and the ASA. I will be working with local activist groups like the Nottingham AI Safety Society to get as many people as possible to sign these letters. The more people who sign on to this letter, the louder the chorus will be, and the higher the chances are that this will trigger a real investigation to get these policies considered. And as before, if you're outside of the UK, you have my full permission to plagiarize these letters and to send them to the regulatory bodies that exist in your country. And finally, policy proposal 3 will probably be the hardest to get passed, because the only way to get this enacted will be via an expansion to the UK's Online Safety Act, and no current bill exists in the UK's Parliament to get this through. If this video stirred any emotions in you, make sure to point them in the right direction by doing the actionable steps I have laid out. If you have enjoyed this video and want to continue supporting my pragmatic, policy-based activism, make sure first to subscribe, like this video, and send it to anyone who you think may be interested. And if you want to take this further, make sure to follow me on Twitter and join my Discord. Those are the places that I'm going to be coordinating my future activism in the future. I even post some exclusive unlisted videos there. Thank you for watching, and stay virtuous.